Hi everyone, welcome to the presentation. My name is Julia. Today I would like to talk to you about systemic coaching and how it can be applied to language learning. First of all, some words about me. As I said, I'm passionate about languages, as everyone here, I would suppose. I've lived and worked in several countries, and my main job actually has nothing to do with languages per se. I work in consulting, but I have always worked in an international environment. So that was for me, the perfect mix. And a while ago, roughly 2 years, when I was starting to see more impact on relationships and what people bring to the table at the work environment, I actually decided to also do an education on the side for a systemic business coach. And today I would like to share some of the insights with you and hopefully inspire you on your language learning journey. First, I will give you an introduction to what coaching is and what systemic coaching then is. That might be new as a terminology. Then I will speak about the pillars of systemic coaching and also show you how they could actually be applied to language learning, followed by an actual coaching process. What are the typical steps that you would have? And an example from myself of how I applied it to one of the issues I had actually when learning languages. And then there's time also for your questions. So first of all, what is coaching? We hear this terminology a lot in different contexts. The first one that comes to mind might be sports, but now it's also exploding everywhere. Generally a coach, so the person giving coaching is helping a coachee, the person that is receiving the coaching, to improve their life or achieve personal goals as well as professional goals. It is focused always on the coachee and what they want to achieve. And the coach is usually a guide and supports towards, first of all, greater self-awareness about their own, about the coachee's performance, and helps to develop strategies and overcome obstacles. In coaching, very often the coach themselves, they also have some expertise and some knowledge in that area, so they can help you to develop certain strategies. Now, what might be different about systemic coaching? Systemic actually comes from the principles of system theory, which is a psychological concept that was used, I think, in the 1950s and 60s very heavily, especially in the context of therapy and family therapy. And in the 80s and 90s, it was actually adapted to also be used outside of that context, because people realize the questions and the setup, they are actually very helpful also outside the therapy context. And it emphasizes the interconnectedness of individuals and systems in order to create positive changes. And it would help you to understand and work within complex systems. So identify and address patterns of behavior and thinking and overcome them. I will explain a bit better in a minute what complex systems are. And the coach's role in this case is to create insights needed for a positive benefit to the coachee and his system. So unlike the coach that we have seen before, the coach's role here in systemic coaching is really just to create awareness and not to give recommendations during the session. So when we talk about interconnectedness, it makes sense to take a look at what actually shapes ourselves. What are we made of? If we look at it, first of all, our relationships, not just friends, but also our family relationships from the very beginning when we grow up and way into adulthood shape us, as well as our work environment, maybe when we're younger, the school environment. And of course, also our culture that we grow up in, which are things that we take in as understanding of ourselves, very often unconsciously, and also our understanding of an environment, of how it should be and what is perceived as normal for us. Growing up in different cultures also means that you are used to different levels of interaction, communication style, and so on. In all these environments, we make experiences, both positive ones that shape us as well as negative ones that also influence how we behave in the future. And of course, another big pillar is body and health. So not just our physical health, but also our mental health and what we bring to the table. All these together shape our beliefs and values that we have, our understanding about ourselves, and interact with each other and create interconnections. What does that mean? We cannot look at them individually, and thus also looking at an issue that we have just in a certain environment doesn't help us as much as actually acknowledging that there are connections between them. So now I would like to take a look at the pillars of systemic coaching to let you know what are parts that you always come across when you're in a coaching setting, and explain them to you and apply them to language learning. First of all, we have just seen it, beliefs and values. In coaching, generally, you would get help to explore your beliefs and values to gain a deeper understanding of how you are and how that actually impacts your behavior, as well as patterns and habits that you have that are shaped, both positive ones and negative ones, ideally helping you to shape the negative ones into more helpful ones. Your relationship and system as a big pillar. So really recognizing the impact relationships and systems have on a person's life and taking them into consideration when setting up goals. All of them foster reflection and self-awareness. So you get a deeper understanding of who you are, and that helps you to set up your right goals. And another important pillar, especially of systemic coaching, is resource-based problem solving. So systemic coaching really believes that everyone has the capacity to change from within, making use of their own resources that they have available in all sorts of areas. So that means the coach is actually also just there to help you, to guide you through the process, mostly by asking questions. And the coachee is the one that talks. So that's why I think it's also applicable and you can actually self-coach yourself. Looking into those pillars in a bit more detail for language learning, beliefs and values could mean, for example, identifying and challenging limiting beliefs that you have, knowing your motivation, fears and expectation when it comes to language learning is very helpful to then actually be able to adopt a positive mindset. I have always brought some examples and some questions. So example thoughts that one could have is, I'm not good enough. So self-confidence topic, which typically would be answered by a coach to say, hey, look into that. Who specifically is actually saying that? And when do you feel that way? How does it make you feel? And other thoughts could be, I'm afraid to make mistakes. I think something we also all know that could be related to a value such as perfectionism, for example. Or I feel like I need to do more. I'm not doing enough, which could be a classic case of diligence as a value that you have, that you always want to be diligent in everything you do. Or also something like, I'm good or bad at this and I will never learn it, which is an indicator for a fixed mindset, thinking that you cannot change in that specific area. And the coach would typically challenge that. If you want to challenge yourself, you could take one of these beliefs that you have and say, okay, if I actually held on to this belief for 20 more years, who will I have become? What will I have learned? And just let that play through in your mind to see what kind of impact actually these beliefs have on you. And also, of course, they are very related to patterns and habits. So if I think about patterns and habits, that's not just about how you behave and how you act at work and so on. But it's also very important to identify your language learning habits, for example. So you could recognize negative habits such as procrastinating or avoidance, bring them into conclusion with in connection with your beliefs and values to understand when this is actually happening, analyze your environment and what kind of impact that has on your habits and on your learning behavior, and then get to a point, ideally, where you can develop more positive habits, such as, for example, regular practice or seeking feedback that could help you to overcome. Some examples that I've noticed when speaking to people about this, for example, is I'm spending a lot of time on grammar, a skill I'm already good at, but maybe I should spend more time on this and that, but I'm not doing it, and I still feel good afterwards because I spent X hours on language learning. The question then to ask would be, okay, how do these habits actually impact your language learning or your progress? What factors contributes to this behavior? And also another example would be, every time I make a mistake, I get very discouraged. This is an invite for a coach to ask about generalization. If someone says every time, I would really ask again, always, every time, everyone, everywhere. Does it really happen all the time? Or can you think of exceptions where maybe it was different? That then would help you to actually get more healthy habits that would help you to go forward. And also, of course, acknowledging the good habits that you already have and maybe applying them to a different context. For example, someone might say, I'm very good at regular practice, but maybe they need to tweak here and there how they organize their regular practice. Relationships and systems. For language learning, of course, one big part is which culture you're in, which social dynamics you're experiencing, depending on which language you learn, and also language barriers that are impacting your learning process. It helps you to understand the cultural context of the language and develop intercultural competence. Maybe your goal is also to develop social connections and ultimately foster a sense of belonging into the community where you are, which is like a deep psychological need all of us have. So when you think about your habits and some of them that might be helpful or not helpful, looking in both ways, a coach would typically ask you, what impact does this behavior have on others? In, for example, friends or teachers or your language partner, if you behave in a certain way. And I think in the context of polyglots, it would also be interesting to look at the relationship to other languages, right? Because we have all limited time and resources. So thinking about how spending a lot of time on a certain topic in one language could impact another one is a helpful indication of how beneficial your habits are. And also thinking about first potential solutions, like, hey, I could speak to the neighbors if I actually knew how to speak it. Or looking at the language example, learning Italian takes up a lot of my time, for example, but I don't have enough time for Spanish. So I would like to learn both. Those goals are conflicting, and I need to kind of balance them out, which would be something to look deeper into and actually spend the time to assess how much time you're spending on each of those and how you are spending that time. So taking a question from systemic coaching would also be to ask, what role do you typically play in each of the languages? What do you spend time on? And how does that benefit your language learning? Having all these, I think it's more of an overarching topic as reflection and self-awareness. In this case, it means also better understanding your own language learning style and level, identifying your strengths and weaknesses, setting the right goals, and making positive changes in your learning style. So questions that typically come up here, I think I think learners general are already pretty aware of what is going on in their lives, but I noticed that there are some questions that can still help. For example, how do you talk to yourself in your head or when you are alone? These thoughts that just rapidly come up, that could be an indicator of how you could actually improve, or how do you react to challenging situations, and is this helpful or harming to your overall learning progress? For example, how do you react when you make a mistake? Is that helpful to your learning or not? How do you perceive yourself in that moment? And sometimes people are also very self-critical. So then the question, how would others perceive you in that moment, could also be really helpful. Taking that outside look and saying, hey, maybe I'm not as bad as I think, and actually other people think I am speaking well, to also gain more self-confidence and get a more realistic and overall holistic image of yourself. And in that case, also, again, use your imagination to say, what would happen if I actually thought about myself differently? You know, what would that do to my language learning process? Typical examples that I've heard is that I'm good at something, but maybe I'm not so great at speaking. So then adapting your learning style there could be an example. Or my goals are too easy or too hard, and thus they do not motivate me. Having this level of awareness where you are with your goal setting and regularly reviewing them could be an example applied to language learning, and as well as then shifting your time, for example, to get closer to your goals. Lastly, we have resource-based problem solving. As I said, systemic coaching believes that you have the right resources, which you could leverage, just maybe in a different area. Encourages you to think more creatively about how you could solve problems, and empower your learning with a growth mindset. So thinking about which resources you have available at the moment, like time, money, skills, and knowledge, as well as what other resources might be available, like support from a friend or from the community, is one of the things that could happen in this phase. For example, you could use lost commute time for vocabulary review, or you could notice, hey, actually, I love sports, has nothing to do with languages, but I could watch videos in Spanish instead to get more listening practice in. I could get a teacher for XYZ, or I know I need external accountability. I need to tell my friend that I'm learning this language, and he will ask me every week how I'm doing, and that will motivate me. And sometimes it happens that you cannot come up with a solution. Like you're like, I don't have resources in this area. I don't know what to do. A coach might ask you if there was another situation that is somehow similar to language learning, where you actually managed to solve a similar problem, which will then help you to identify resources you didn't know you have, and also help you to look at how you could sustain this progress over time. So this is a first setup. I see some question already about expectations of systemic coaching, and which I consider unrealistic. I will answer that a bit later. But first of all, I will continue with the coaching process. So a typical coaching process usually happens with an introduction, which is used to identify the issue or problem at hand that the coachee has, and of course build relationship and build trust between the two partners. You need to have a good communication base to be able to open up and talk about your issues, followed by a problem exploration. So what we've just seen as the pillars of systemic coaching, they are usually also used to explore the issue on a deeper level. So going from the surface, I am bad at this, to understanding underlying patterns, beliefs, and values, and also understanding the impact on the whole system. So what does that actually mean? What consequences does it have, etc.? Followed by a first initial goal setting. So for the specific coaching session, you would set up a goal, what the coachee wants to achieve by the end of this session, and then followed by a problem or solution exploration, depending on how specific the goal already is. Sometimes it's already pretty pretty accurate. Sometimes it's still missing some information, so you would rather go deeper down in order to be able to really reach that goal and identify those roadblocks that are in the way, and also thinking about consequences of the potential solutions on the overall system to make sure that this is the right way, which is then followed by the validation of the goal. So ideally, in a really great coaching session, you have reached your goal already. You found out what is the problem that you have had and why it's happening, and you can move forward. Or what is more often the case is actually you have a clear plan on how to continue. So you have a different level of awareness about the issue at hand, and you have a plan. And very often here at this stage, you would also visualize your goal. So either writing it down in a full sentence, taking a paper with you, creating an image in your head about your goal. There are different tools that you could use. And after that, you just recap everything and define the goals for the next session and create commitment. Then next, I would like to give you an example about my own language learning journey, just to make it more understandable of how I applied it to myself without a coach. So then maybe you can also do it. It's an example from when I was learning Dutch. And I noticed that I was back then in the working environment. I was sent on a project in the Netherlands, and I understood most conversations, but I was not able to speak it. And I wanted to speak it too, of course. But something was blocking me, and I actually didn't know what it was, because I said, actually, in other languages, I have no issues. I can make mistakes, and I'm not so shy to speak. And I don't know, somehow this is not working for Dutch, and I don't understand why, especially because when I was speaking, I actually had positive moments. So when I was trying to speak to the cashier or something, I didn't have, like, they understood me most of the time, and somehow I still didn't do it. So it was very strange for me, and I asked myself I used some of the systemic questions to find out what is happening. First of all, I set my goal, which was being able to speak Dutch as well as I understand it at that time, and getting more specific, because this was still very vague. I was thinking about the situations when I wanted to speak Dutch and I did not. So I said, okay, when I have the sentence ready in my head, I would actually like to speak that sentence out loud. So what was happening very often is I was forming the sentence, it was all fine, but I didn't actually say it, like it came out in English again. So yeah, that was my first goal. And until here, you would say, okay, you just do it fine. But I didn't identify the underlying issues yet, because it seems like you could just do it the next day, but I did not. So I took a deeper look at the problem, actually, and noticed what was different about Dutch. So first of all, there were two beliefs that were blocking me. One was Dutch is easy for a German. So that is probably true on an objective level. It's easier than other languages, which also means I could understand a lot without actually practicing. But I created the expectation in my head that I would be able to speak without practice. And that was limiting me then every time, because it was contradicting with what I experienced. And the second big influencing factor in my case was that I was mostly hearing and getting the possibility to speak Dutch in the work environment. And one of my beliefs that had nothing to do with language learning, but with the environment I was in, was, oh, I have to be professional and mistakes are not professional. And if I speak Dutch, I will make mistakes. So then I'm not professional anymore. So fully in my head, looking at it today, I can understand that it didn't make sense. But in my head, it was true. And my values of perfectionism then were triggered. And I had to, it was a revelation to me to have these two limiting beliefs actually, and values that are behind the fact of why I'm not speaking. So I looked for a solution, and in my case, that was further defining the goal as getting, first of all, a language partner, speaking in a safe environment. That was for me a sub goal, because I said I will not be able to just speak from tomorrow onwards, and I will also not get the right feedback. I'm not able to let go of this professional belief yet. And second, I also decided to write an article every week. So like a short diary entry or about a topic or what I experienced during the week, even about work, what I did, that helped me to identify differences in the languages, because in my head, Dutch is easy for a German. They were still almost like one language. And I needed to have a separate experience with Dutch. So yeah, those were my two goals that came out of this. And to make it also accountable to myself, I decided to review my progress in 6 weeks. I set a calendar reminder. This works well for me. Maybe some other things work for you. To actually speak at the office. I imagined it also very clearly where and when. There was a coffee bar where I went every day. And the lady didn't speak a lot of English, so she also wanted to chit-chat. But yeah, I never chit-chatted with her, but she did it with everyone else. So it's like, okay, this is the perfect situation to actually get into speaking. And for me personally, I tend to look a lot at and review a lot and see what I've been doing and how I can improve. So actually looking at the first article and the last article that I wrote within those 6 weeks was a reminder for me to see how far I've come until then, and also keep me motivated to move forward. Yeah, so that was a short glimpse into coaching experience. If you want to learn more about it, I suggested some things. First of all, light reading. I think you can Google both the coaching questions and the systemic questions and just try it out, having the pillars in mind when having some issues on your learning journey. I recommended 2 German books. I'm not sure if they are translatable, if they are translated already as books, but I'm sure you can find something similar. And otherwise, if you're really hooked up on all this topic, I also wrote down some authors of systemic coaching that have really shaped the industry, as well as systemic family therapy, where it's coming from, and psychological concepts that are part of the systemic coaching that then, you could have a read on. And of course, I have to say this as a coach, if you actually have, if you realize you tackle some deeper lying issues and you cannot continue by yourself, can happen that by accident you discover something that you didn't know, then of course involve a specialist. Okay, so I see already, I cannot see you, but I see the questions, so thanks a lot. I see some greetings from Bolivia. What expectations of systemic coaching do you consider unrealistic? So first of all, I think systemic coaching is something that is a light concept that can be used in various contexts. So if you do 1, 2, 3 coaching sessions, you will actually be able to see some differences, and you can apply them yourself, believing that you have the resources available change. What I think is unrealistic, and where it then needs to be handed over to other methods, is that you can really change everything by yourself, depending on which environment you are in. So as this is also coming from family therapy, if you are in a very difficult environment, I think you should acknowledge that and know your limits. You know your limits well, and maybe also use other resources. So I don't think it's the one solution for everything. I would say it's a guide and something that can help you along the way. So the expectation of systemic coaching could actually help you to solve all your problems. I think that's unrealistic. It's just an inspiration. What kind of issues are coaching best equipped to deal with, and what kinds cannot be effectively resolved through coaching? First of all, the issues that are great for coaching is, I have something that is going on. It's coming up every X time. For example, at work, when there's my colleague, I always freak out and I don't know why this is happening, but he's always like getting on my nerves. Or I have this issue that I don't know how much I try to change it. It's coming up every time again. So things that happen in your life or in your professional work that actually you are not 100% sure where it's coming from, but still they are not impacting your life that much that you are not functional anymore. So I mean, these are all issues that are great for coaching, or also general improvement topics. I just want to get better at XYZ and I'm out of ideas of what I could do. All great situations for coaching. Or generally speaking, also relationship issues. I have an issue with my partner about this or that, are great topics that could go into coaching. What are the limitations of coaching is everything that is actually already diagnosed. So, and that would also be something that cannot be effectively resolved through coaching. So let's say you are diagnosed with a certain mental illness and you want to work on that. A coach is not equipped to solve that. To give you an example, you're struggling with depression, for example. A coach would not be able to coach you the right way to resolve your depression issue. A psychotherapist would be a better person to go there. What a coach could still do in that case is a very specific problem that you have. I am depressed and I don't dare to go outside to do shopping, for example. A coach could still help you to see, hey, how could you actually do shopping? So a very narrow, small use case is then still available for coaching, but everything else is then left to medicals. Okay, so I think there was one question also. Did you try to make a family constellation for a specific language learning situation? And yes, what was your experience? I'm not sure if I already answered it with the coaching process or when this question came up. For me, for Dutch, this was one case where I did it. And there's another concept which is called the family board, which I also used for a different case to put my languages into relationship with each other. So typically from family therapy, you would put all the people that are within your family and try to resolve the issue that you have at hand. And I use that as well for languages to have an understanding of how they impact each other, how much time I'm spending on which one, and what kind of different beliefs I have in each one of them. Yeah, for Dutch in the end, then I managed to speak. That was also a question. It's definitely better than before. I can speak to friends. I can speak in the work environment. I even had to do some presentation at some point. So it was definitely better, and not afraid to make mistakes anymore. So constantly improving. Another question that was very specific that I'm not sure I can answer in such a short amount, but I will just give my opinion. What advice could you give for the situation? I've been speaking with my colleagues in Portugal, and I would like to change it now, but it feels too late to change now. I know this issue. I've also had it when you get to know someone in a certain language. I can understand that it's then hard to switch to another one. What I would give you as an advice is to look into why exactly this feels too late for you now. What about it feels too late? Why you think this cannot be changed? How it's impacting you? How it would impact your colleagues? What you think your colleagues might say, and also what impact it has on your language learning, and if they would support it. I guess you know the colleagues for a while now. Usually it's more dramatic in your head than it actually is, and they would be able to support your journey. At least I can tell you from my Dutch experience that in the end nobody thought how I thought about it, and it was not a problem, and they were happy to tell me jokes in Dutch all the time. So just think about how much you want it, why you want it, and see if you can change it. Maybe also just start with a smaller group. If all the colleagues is too much, maybe you just start with one colleague that you trust, and that could help you along the journey, and then gradually move towards that goal. Just break it down into smaller goals. I hope that answers the questions. I have another one. If you had to give it the most important advice to keep the process of learning a fourth language, what would it be? So I assume, and correct me if it's not right, then just ask another question, Monica. I think the ideas of how do you keep learning that fourth language instead of giving up on it, or how do you keep motivated? Motivated is something very, very individual. So in your case, I don't know what keeps you motivated. In my case, it's looking back and thinking about why I actually want to learn this language, and how I would be and how I would think about myself if I actually spoke that language, or if I can use it in certain contexts. So once the goal is strong enough, I have no problem of going on. If my goal is not strong enough, I can decide to either work on it or let go of that language, which happens, and then it's also fine. But maybe you can also work on your goal and visualize it more, and think more about how that goal is for you, what it means to you, and why you would like to invest more time into it. Okay. Can you elaborate a little more on how you became a certified coach and what kind of education it took you? Yeah, so the coaching field, unfortunately, I can speak for Germany, but I think it's actually worldwide, is not very regulated. So there are a lot of different coaching educations out there. At the end, I can list 2 institutes that are more well known. In my case, it was the European Coaching Association. And my coaching training was for over a year, in which I had several modules to cover, starting from how do you ask questions, how do you listen, certain psychological concepts that you need in order to be a good coach, techniques, tools, self-exploration, different modules that you need to cover in order to become a coach. It was on the weekend, so it was 2 to 3, sometimes 4 full days. We had to take some time off from work to learn the techniques, followed by a written documentation about the coachings that you did, both with other coaching partners from your course or from the community, as well as complete strangers. So that was then a different level, and everything. So both the recordings of the external coachings with strangers, as well as the written documentation of these coachings, were then evaluated by the European Coaching Association, who gave me then the certification to become a coach. And generally speaking, I would also encourage you to try out, if you want to really do a coaching education, try out different ones, go to introduction lessons, see which coaching association actually fits for you, and find a credible one that gets the right mix between psychological basics that you need and practice. And it's a bit of time invest, but I think it's really worth it. Even if you don't work as a coach afterwards, you learn a lot about yourself. Okay, I think that were all the questions. Thanks a lot, everyone. I hope I could give you some inspiration for your language learning journey, and I hope to speak to you either in one of the rooms, or feel free to also reach out to me if you have more questions. Thanks a lot.